Okay, good morning again. This is Jennifer Harmoning from the Burnsville Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to our 2021 Transportation Forum. We're going to be moving through pretty quickly here, so I want to jump in to our program and start off with Ryan Wilson from MnDOT. Ryan, do you want to jump in?
Sure, I'd be happy to. As Jennifer said, I'm Ryan Wilson. I'm the South Area Manager for our Metro District, which means I have a responsibility for helping to deliver our program in Scott, Carver, and Dakota counties. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and going to give you an update on a few projects and a super secret walk-on item for 20 seconds that didn't make its way into the slides, but I'll cover that a bit later in the presentation. Next. Am I running? Can I run this, Jen, or are you running it? Jen has got it. Okay. This first one will be brief. This is just to kind of recap. We're really at the conclusion of one large project in the Southern Metro, which would be the river crossing on over Minnesota on I-35W next. And this project was covering a lot of different facets. Really, I'm sure you're all well familiar with it, have experienced the construction. Though traffic was a bit slower last year or a bit less than, of course, making things a bit easier on the construction front. But we replaced the bridge over the river, raised the structure out of the floodplain, now carrying 4 lanes and impasse over the bridge, improving safety, dealing with some pavement conditions from 106 to Cliff. Of course, the bridge itself was a large component of that cost. We're also facilitating a trail on the east side, which I'll mention here in a moment. Next. The bridge itself, all this work on this project is substantially complete. We're certainly having some cleanup items here over the remainder of the summer, but the bridge itself is done. There is a deck planing that was, I believe, somewhat recently done. I get so many construction updates, I sometimes lose track of what happened when. But a final deck planing of that surface just to improve the ride smoothness as we wrap up that work on the structure itself. Next. And the pavement itself is also essentially open. We have the bridge open, 4 lanes are open. The final pavement layer was just completed a couple weekends ago. Lanes and ramps are now open. And as I said, you can expect some periodic lane and off-peak closures kind of for wrapping things up, some pavement markings. I think we have some lighting and cleanup work to do along various points of the project. Next. And I did mention the trail. This is something that's probably been on the radar of quite a few, where in Bloomington and Burnsville have quite an extensive network currently and envision into the future. And this is facilitating a new trail on the east side of the bridge itself to help make those connections to the public system. So connecting Black Dog Road on the south and then Lindale Avenue on the north in Bloomington. It really is, if you've been on any of the newer structures we have, it's really a relatively wide structure, allowing walking and bicycling and room to pass, which is not something that exists on some of our older structures. And we have a joint kind of maintenance effort. Certainly the DOT has a responsibility for the bridge itself and longer maintenance. And then we have a partnership with the cities on maintenance for snow and ice. Next. I will move into kind of a continuation along 35. We have a couple initiatives, and this is where I'll sneak in my super secret agenda item here in a moment. But we have a next on I-35 from basically south of where that project ended that we just talked about, so the River Bridge project. In 25-26, we have a very large pavement project planned on 35, something we call an unbonded overlay. So it's essentially building, either we're reconstructing the road or building a new concrete road on the existing surface. And then we're also overlaying the ramps themselves, addressing ADA improvements along the corridor, and replacement of 2 or 3 bridges in Burnsville. So it's going to be a situation where we will have traffic impacts on the main line, traffic impacts on the bridges. That will, of course, all these bridges will not be closed at the same time. We can't have that kind of limited access through Burnsville and across 35, but it's significant. We're talking about a project that's about $100 million in total cost, which is a very large project for us as a district. Not as large as it gets, but quite large. And again, that's currently planned over the 25 and 26 construction seasons. You see on the slide that Burnsville Parkway is currently unfunded. I guess I can call it the bridge in best condition out of those three. We are actively trying to figure out a way to have that project happen with these other three. It just, we don't want to have to come back in 10 years and have another impact, because that's the cycle this bridge is on, and we just don't quite have the funds identified yet. But we are, I'd say more likely than not, I'd like to believe that all three of these projects will, all three of those bridges will be part of this construction project in 25, 26, when all is said and done. Next, next. The other thing we did in advance of this project is we undertook a spot mobility study to assess what types of things we might be able to add to this project to improve mobility in the corridor. We know I-35, like many of our corridors, have certain locations that could benefit from relatively small dollar improvements and make a big difference in terms of improving congestion, minimizing slow spots, reducing spot safety issues. And so we undertook an exercise to assess where some of those opportunities might be on this corridor, and then working towards trying to include some of them in this project. Next. I will not go through these in detail. I'll show you the couple that kind of made it out. I just kind of wanted to give you a sense of what we do in an exercise like this. We have quite a few spot locations, and this is a list of some of the ones that made it through the first screening process. And we essentially evaluated those spot improvements for their cost, annual benefit, essentially giving us a return period. Next. And then we also weighed that against some of the less quantitative but important qualitative criteria: noise wall impacts, impacts on possible transit service, what would it impact in terms of a possible min-pass extension at a later point in time. Next. And that brings us to a range of feasible solutions. So ones that had a relatively good return life, that kind of met our purpose for the corridor and met to some reasonable level what we felt we could accomplish from a cost perspective. So all of our proposals have a, and I'll quickly show you all of these, have a northbound acceleration lane in County Road 42. And then we kind of have three different packages, which unsurprisingly might cost a little bit more money. They solve a few more challenges, but they of course cost a little bit more. So we're trying to package this all together. Next. This is that northbound acceleration lane. So north of County Road 42, this is a pinch point that's been around for quite some time. Vehicles merging on to 35 north from 42. So this is one that will, I mean, almost for certain be included in this project and exist in all the funding packages. Next. This is another concept that did well and is kind of in our base funding one that we plan to include at this point in time. So this would be kind of the creation of a northbound buffer lane at Highway 13. Again, the purpose here is to try to provide some additional space and opportunities for vehicles to merge from 13 into 35, which is again another fairly known point of congestion. And we're rebuilding this bridge, so this allows us to kind of take on this improvement at a relatively low cost, as opposed to doing it by itself at some other point in time. Next. And this is another concept. This is kind of in our funding, kind of our middle funding package that we're contemplating, probably a good chance of getting carried forward. This is a buffer lane in the other direction, trying to kind of buffer again at that Highway 13 merge point with 35 southbound this time, and then trying to extend that, what would be aux lane, or would be better called an auxiliary lane. So extend that auxiliary lane from Highway 13 to Burnsville Parkway. Next. And then finally, this graphic for some reason came in very grainy. Apologies about that. And this is the one that is kind of on the farther end of the funding spectrum, but extending an auxiliary lane from Highway 13 up through Cliff Road, again, solves some of those challenges. Next, and I'll just leave you with, I mentioned we're trying to kind of figure out how to weave these improvements into that pavement project, and we kind of have about 8 or 9 million in mobility money that we're trying to package into this broader $90–100 million project. And so all these solutions have some moderate noise wall risk at Burnsville Parkway and Highway 13, but no impacts to transit. And we would be able to address some of the bridge tweaks that would be necessary as part of our project, given that we're replacing those bridges. Next, and I think I have about 5 minutes left here to talk about Highway 13. So Highway 13, this is a project that may be on some of your radars, that we have a relatively large environmental assessment going on. In fact, the public comment period just closed last night, if I'm not mistaken, which would be looking at Highway 13 from 101, 169 through through Nicollet Avenue in Burnsville, and trying to understand what the needs are on that corridor and reach some type of consensus about what the long-term vision is. Next. And you're all well familiar that Highway 13 is a road that does carry a fair amount of traffic for its size. It is identified on the National Freight Network. It carries considerable freight volume, and it has a number of intersections that have crash rates above what we would call our critical crash rate for similar intersections. And it's really not I have attempted to bike along this corridor in part to experience it, and it's not the easiest place to move for bicycle and pedestrians. So I think trying to accommodate those users in this vision is also very important. Next. Timeline, I talked about how we're kind of through the public comment period for what we would call our environmental assessment. And that's where we're at here. We're trying to complete the environmental document for the entire corridor. And I'll talk about maybe on the next slide how this actually relates to other corridor projects. So next, please, Jen. So when I talk about a corridor vision and footprint, what does that mean? So we're defining a corridor vision and a footprint of what that vision would require in terms of space or right-of-way needs or environmental impacts for the whole corridor from 101 to Nicollet Avenue. And by clearing that environmentally, like this broader vision of potential, kind of a maximum footprint, if you think about it that way, by clearing that maximum footprint in one environmental document, it allows us to tackle successive construction projects in the corridor as funding opportunities become available. And so it's a different process. What's called a hybrid environmental assessment. We're actually the first agency that's kind of undertaking such an approach, and it seems to be working really well, and it really does allow for that flexibility to address the future corridor. You have less work to do if you can look at it that way as you get to future successive construction projects. Next. If you haven't ever seen this, this is so the hybrid EA process has involvement from all the partners along this corridor, has undertaken quite a bit of public outreach, and this is the recommended access scenario. Again, future projects could modify this, but this is the recommended access scenario out of that hybrid EA. Primary P intersections, meaning most likely a grade separated intersection, and the S or secondary intersection would be some type of like limited access. And the P is not necessarily fully grade separated. It could be some type of hybrid situation, which I will show you briefly on the next slide, please. So we talk about various different types of things that can happen at these intersections. You know, that secondary intersection might have some type of at grade situation. We will probably do something to limit certain movements so that we can maintain mainline volume, minimize safety risks, but also allow some turning movements to key destinations. Hybrid and freeway or grade separated would be the type of treatment that would be more likely contemplated at those primary intersections. So Nicollet Avenue in Burnsville, for example. So there's different types of treatments that you can use, either a full interchange to some type of, that middle graphic you see is where you direct some movements to key destinations, but you don't necessarily build the infrastructure associated with a large intersection, a large interchange, excuse me. Next, the final 2 slides I'll say will be what are we doing right now? So we have this larger EA, which is concluding the public comment period, as I said yesterday, and eventually hoping to get a finding on that environmental document that allows us to move towards construction. And the first construction project, if you have not heard, is coming along pretty quick. There is a new interchange being built at the ports of Savage, so Dakota, roughly from just west of Dakota Avenue through Yosemite. And we are building an interchange there, but also realigning the frontage roads in this area, as you all likely know, serves considerable freight and shipping volumes, has very high amount of truck traffic turning. And so those are some unique characteristics that we had to contemplate, as well as allowing for storage of trucks far more than we normally would along frontage roads, because that is UP's main line, as you all know, there on the north, and trains can move through there at, you know, fast or slow speeds. And so we need to allow trucks a place to pull over and park, and continue to allow vehicles to access businesses when trains move through that Dakota intersection. So that is going to also be a 2-year project. Next slide. This is the last slide, I believe. Yeah, so this will be a 2-year project. This is a slide from our open house that we'll be having here, and this is what we would contemplate from currently thinking from a traffic management standpoint, that we would be having what we kind of call I'm drawing a blank on the name here, basically a chute type concept where we would maintain a lane of traffic in each direction during the extent of construction and allow access to the businesses. And then because we're essentially not allowing left turns during construction, we would have some type of U-turn access on each end of the project. And this project is scheduled to begin construction in 2021 and continue through most of 2022. I think that's it from a slide perspective. You can jot down my contact information. I put a couple of the project websites up here, but certainly if you have further questions that we can't cover today, I'm happy to take them anytime. Thank you.
I think we have time for a question or two. Is there anyone who want any burning questions that anyone has for Ryan?
Yeah, this is Tom Taylor. I have one, and it's in regards to the sound walls that I think you were showing you're proposing between Burnsville Parkway and Highway 13 on 35. And I mean, is there a plan? Did I understand that right, that there is a plan to put those in, or that's under consideration?
Tom, thanks for the question. I kind of skirted over that. So the short answer is to be determined, and that's not me trying to punt, it's me trying to recognize the process. So so if we're just generally maintaining a road, so putting new pavement where existing pavement was, or rebuilding a bridge in place, that does not trigger the need to evaluate noise. We have certain types of improvements that, like if we were to add capacity for a whole lane, for example, we would have to evaluate a corridor for noise. What we don't know yet is the type of improvement that's being contemplated there, because we haven't finalized it, going to trigger the need to evaluate noise at that location. And so I meant that to say we've identified that as a potential improvement that would likely require some noise evaluation, but because we haven't decided upon the improvement or the exact nature of it, that's to be determined.
Sure, and that makes sense. I appreciate that. The concern I have on there is, first, I'm in an office building right off the frontage road on the west side, and at that point the freeway is certainly much lower than the road grade, and there's not a significant noise issue. And frankly, on both sides as a commercial district, and use of the firewalls, the sound walls, putting those up can actually be detrimental to the businesses along that route. You take part of the issue that happened north, it would be south of Burnsville Parkway on the west side. It blocked, it blocked some businesses, and they had to get really creative on how they were going to do it. But I think, such as the large sign for Live-In Suites. That there is, I hope when they consider that, they do look at those issues as well, that the impact on the businesses and the visibility that those lots provide to those businesses.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. In the interest of time, I'll say two quick things. One, if we are going down that path because environmental rules necessitate we do, that's not done in isolation. We're certainly seeking the input of affected property owners along the side. And second, it's an exercise that's supposed to be largely targeted at residential properties, right? But obviously, as you noted, there are, you know, shared spaces along these freeways, and all those factors do come into play. So I guess stay tuned, and certainly if you're a business owner along 35 there, it's not something that's going to be done in isolation without your input.
Thank you.
We have 2 minutes. Is there one more question, or do we want to move on? Anyone else have something for Ryan?
Jennifer, it's Dan Keeley. I just want to point out the Ryan pointed out to the pedestrian bridge crossing, and that I've ridden it many times. It's a great pedestrian access to cross the bridge. This isn't Ryan's fault, but MnDOT didn't elevate the trail on the Burnsville side above the floodplain level. But thanks to the efforts of our Ryan Peterson of Burnsville and his staff, they were able to secure a federal grant, and along with some city funds for about half the project, we're going to elevate the path on the Burnsville side to above at least almost all flood events. I think we'd have to hit the 200-year flood event for it to not be accessible. So our biking and pedestrian community is thrilled that that project is getting done, and it's going to ensure that even in the spring and fall flooding periods, accessibility to get across the bridge on a bike or walking or wheelchair will still be preserved.
Great. Thanks, Dan, and thanks, Ryan, and thanks for the shout out to Jen and who secured the grant. With that, thank you, Ryan, for the great presentation. I think we're going to move on now to Doug from Dakota County. Doug, you want to jump in?
Yes, happy to. Thanks everybody for joining, and appreciate this opportunity to update you. You can go ahead. An outline of what I'll present here, some background on the Highway 42 visioning study. Some of you probably heard about it already. It's a long-term study, and I'll give you some business and employment context in that background. And then highlights in Burnsville, some of the needs and ideas that we're seeing there, both general intersection planning and some of the development and traffic-driven concepts at the more complex locations. You're going to hear me say it many times. We've got an open house meeting planned for next week, July 15th from 4 to 7 at Redwood Park in Apple Valley. So that's the first plug for it. And then I have a sidebar. Jen asked me to lean in on another project. We've got a roundabout that received federal funds at County Road 11 and Burnsville Parkway. So I'll touch on that near the end here. Go ahead, please. Just an overview. This study is a 20-year plan, and we're looking at 15.5 miles of corridor, including Burnsville, of course, on the west end. You know that we have many signalized intersections. I won't dive into that too much. I'll come back to some alternative plans for that. Burnsville has the highest traffic volumes, not surprisingly, and a wide range of issues. And I mentioned before, this really is an update of a 20-year planning cycle that we're into. You can go ahead. The process and status. We are approaching the end of the substantive analysis part of this work, and we are pulling recommendations together now. Again, much of what we're looking at is very long-term, and I'll touch on kind of the context for how we manage the corridor over a 20-year period as I move forward into the presentation. But of course, we're actively pushing the messaging out right now, sharing previews of this vision, and of course, listening to questions and feedback. And I think I might have mentioned the open house next week, so you can go ahead. the goals and objectives, I won't dive into this slide too deep, but you might know that local comprehensive plans have been updated on this same cycle. So we're matching into that. So the work that we're doing fits well with some of the forecasting that's been done for traffic and land use. And of course, this plan creates guidance focused on Highway 42. I'll touch on some ideas on managing congestion and delay, access, and the trade-offs of access along a corridor like this, similar to what was just discussed on Highway 13, is a very big part of what you do in planning the corridor. Quite an emphasis this cycle in looking at pedestrians, bicycles, and transit. And I think most important is we prepare a plan so that we've got tools and options ready if and when needed, and as traffic actually presents itself along the corridor. Forecasts are one thing, and reality as we move forward is something we monitor. Important to kind of give you this overall vision, and this may look pretty general, but there's some analysis behind this that allows us to say that as we look at Highway 42, and you probably know we've got 6 basic lanes of roadway in much of Burnsville, out to around Portland, toward the east side of Burnsville, and then we generally have 4 lanes from there to the east. And we've been able to look at our intersection and access management issues, and we can say that our vision can be held to an opportunity to reduce or defer the need for expansion. So further expansion, basic expansion of 42 is not something we want to pursue. We don't need to pursue it. We have other ways of managing the corridor. That's not to say that we don't need more capacity, but there are ways to manage those needs looking forward. And that's the emphasis of the plan. I've touched on some of these other ideas. Just want to emphasize again near the bottom of those bullets, we're looking at serving all travelers, both the motorists and the other modes. So that's an important element of the study. Context that I think is useful for purposes of this meeting of the chamber. We looked at the concentrations of employment and housing along the corridor. Certainly in Burnsville, you've got the highest concentrations of retail, office, medical, so diverse job base. The transit routes are also shown on here, and MVTA has introduced a new route 447 that holds closer to Highway 42. So that's an exciting development in terms of the future of transit along 42. And there again, I think it's going to be somewhat of an observational approach to managing future transit, but we have specific locations where we're looking at some transit opportunities along 42 as part of this plan. And this graphic also illustrates that there's higher density housing. And so we're kind of illustrating here, and you get this sense of the connection between Burnsville and the core of Apple Valley as a likely emphasis for transit service. And that in fact has kind of borne out to be the case and continues to be the focus area for that type of service. Go ahead. Little just basic vocabulary here as we look at how to manage intersections, not unlike what Brian talked about for Highway 13, just looking at how to manage conflicts. So there are many conflict points at a typical all directional intersection at grade, and then the opportunities for management of those intersections include improving movements and capacity through turn lane adjustments, signal technology, and then of course more engineered solution, sometimes removing signals. So we can reduce the number of conflicts significantly when we go to three-quarter intersection or a right in, right out, which you're probably familiar with along segments of Highway 42 already. These are not new tools. These are similar to approaches that were used in the 1999 plan for 42. You can move ahead. Something that is evolving and is important to this corridor in terms of looking at how the county might wish to manage things, working with our local partners, is technology. And it's interesting, we've had questions from all three city councils about the role of technology, signal timing, connectedness along the corridor. And this also then relates to alternative routes. So the point here is that it's not just 42. We may, as we look at management of 42 in the future, look at supporting roadways and even how expanding connected systems, and we do have connected signals through fiber optics along 42 currently. We don't along a route like South Cross. So South Cross is an example of a local city route that supports 42 and doesn't have as much of that technology deployed. So it's a possibility for the future, and I think that's what we will conclude in this plan, and then there'll be more to look at in the future in terms of the specifics on these types of ideas. Go ahead. This gives you a preview. I know this is pretty simple and schematic, but it's working from that orientation I gave you a little while ago, that we look at each intersection one at a time, how we might manage it for the future. And that ribbon along the bottom, it's kind of highlighted in white, is actually the adopted 1999 plan. And traffic on 42 actually has not grown as much as was forecasted 20 years ago, fortunately. So it's grown, but it hasn't grown as much as that forecast. So we kind of bought some time. And as we kind of look at where we're at in this current planning process, many of the things that we're seeing are similar to what we looked at in 1999, and many of the recommendations, in fact, will be similar. So that's a high level preview. I've got a focus area coming up, you can see on the right hand side of this slide, so we'll just move right to that. That's in the Burnsville Center area. You probably know that the city has been working hard on the Burnsville Center Village area and the vision for that. And there are some ideas for how the future network might work, including principally Aldrich Avenue becoming more of a principal north-south boulevard with some capacity, not doing a little bit of work, but doing a pretty good amount of traffic handling on it as possible vision through this redevelopment area. That vision also looked at a bike ped underpass west of Aldrich, and you can just see it in the orange crossing that's illustrated there. And then there are transit service issues that feed into this, the future Orange Line extension, for example, which is envisioned to come in at some point in the future, and probably tied a little bit with development. Many things tied to development up here. From a Dakota County standpoint, one thing we looked at here is opportunities to combine elements and also manage high volumes and issues with redevelopment. You can see there's a lot of yellow on 42 there, and indicating possibility of reconstruction. We're trying to, as I mentioned before, limit or avoid expansion of 42, even along a relatively limited segment like this. So I'll move forward and show you some of the ideas that we're considering. This is pretty general, same location, but a different perspective. If you note the grade on Aldrich, we are in our plan proposing that a local road be considered to go underneath 42 possibly Aldrich or possibly another roadway in this area. We've looked at some concepts that would involve Aldrich crossing underneath 42 and then connecting back through some reconfigured intersections as part of the future roadway network out here. So I'm not going to present all those various ideas because they're all alternatives and we've got many years to figure out those choices. But the main point is that there's an opportunity and the grades work well to simply, I shouldn't say simply either, but there are ways to go underneath 42 in this area in general. And we think that combining a roadway with improved pedestrian and bicycle connections might be a possibility for the area. Go ahead. Another focus area, looking at the graphic on the left, just to kind of help locate us, primarily looking here along 35W, and certainly this whole segment of 42 that involves the freeway interchanges with 35W and 35E is complex, and there are many things interacting, but I'll focus on just one idea. The layout that you saw previously on the right side here, in the city's vision and traffic study, included this idea of a split ramp southbound from 35W connecting into directly into the redevelopment area, possibly through a roundabout that's shown there, and then some rethinking of Buck Hill Road. So there are different ways to look at this area. And if you go to the next slide, I'll just mix it up a little more. This is very schematic and simple, but another thing that the county and actually the city did bring to the table too. We were talking about this near the end of the city's study of traffic and transportation options for the Burnsville Center redevelopment is also considering a loop ramp to take traffic from southbound 35W underneath 42 and then looping back to eastbound 42. So that's a very heavy movement. It has potential to provide some benefits. We're currently looking at a number of ideas here, and the main thing to think of here is that there are many alternatives. There are many possibilities on how to combine these elements. We are talking with the city and MnDOT about a possible funding application that might include some of these elements. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Jen might refer to that later. And I would say don't take everything quite so literally when you look at some of these drawings, because we're still working on alternatives. Finally, just wrapping up on 42, I want to note public outreach again. We had the opportunity to pop up and greet people at the Back to the 80s car show at Buck Hill, which was a great event. And it had pretty good Burnsville showing there. We were right next to your tent, Burnsville, so it was great to have that presence together. And you can see people just glued to the board about Highway 42 and instead of looking at classic cars. So we appreciate that. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but these types of things are something we've been doing a bit of, and we'll do more of them. And you can go ahead. And did I mention that we have an in-person public open house next week on Thursday from 4 to 7 at Redwood Park in Apple Valley? The neighborhood over there is very connected to Burnsville. So we've got the eastern side of Burnsville and the western side of Apple Valley kind of coming together at this location. So it is your city. There are some business district interests out there too, especially in Apple Valley, I have to admit, more so. But when you get over to Lac Lavon and so forth in Burnsville, you're also seeing that kind of district where we've got some interest in hearing from people. We've been doing a lot of public outreach on this project. I won't go into all that, but we had some pretty good success with the electronic feedback. We're excited to greet people in person again. So that's a nice change. You can go ahead then, Jen. I mentioned I do a sidebar. Had the pleasure of working with the city, with Jen in particular, on a funding application for a proposed roundabout at Burnsville Parkway and County Road 11. This is just south of Highway 13. Characteristics of this area are moderate traffic volumes, but signals are aging, kind of along the lines of what I was saying before. You know, technology is changing. We've got old technology, old signals and infrastructure out there need to reconstruct at some point. So what do? And maybe not rebuild it exactly the same as it is. This is a Parkway setting. There are points to be made for the value of this in terms of how it could work with the setting out there next to Terrace Oak Park West. The feasibility of a roundabout is generally confirmed. We've got a little more work to do on that, but we'll move into more studies and design. This looks like a pretty strong go as far as all parameters. We received 1.4 million federal grant, and we're targeting 2024 construction. So that's the update on that one. You can find anything about Dakota County by going to our webpage, dakotacounty.us. And it's similar to Google, so you can just search for what you're looking for, like 42 visioning study. There's my email address, and I look forward to following up with you as you like. I'm happy to take your inputs. And if there are any questions, if we have time, I'll be happy to do some of that right now.
Great. Thank you so much, Doug. Actually, we're running right on schedule here to move on. So hopefully Doug will stay with us. If you have other questions, you can throw in the chat for Doug or stay on till the end. Hopefully we'll have a few minutes at the end of the program for additional questions. But with that, I think we'll jump on to Metro Transit. Juan, are you ready to jump in?
Yeah, can you hear me all right, Jennifer?
Yep, great.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation to be a part of the Chamber of Commerce Transportation Forum today. Yeah, my name is Juan Rangel. I'm an outreach coordinator with Metro Transit, and today I'll share an overview of the Metro Orange Line, share some images of recent construction of stations in Burnsville, and just provide an overall update of where the project's at. High level is that the Orange Line will be starting service late this year, late 2021, bringing highway bus rapid transit service to Burnsville. Here we have an illustration that depicts Burnsville Heart of the City Station at the southwest corner of Highway 13 and Nicollet Avenue. You're looking south at a station shelter with a bus, passengers getting off the bus, pedestrians, and the beautiful AIM Center in the background. Next slide, please. So the Metro Orange Line is a highway bus rapid transit line that'll serve 12 stations along I-35W in Burnsville, Bloomington, Richfield, and Minneapolis. It will provide frequent service all day, every day. So provide service to stations every 10 minutes during rush hour and every 15 minutes during non-rush hour. So it'll offer another way to get downtown Minneapolis, not only during rush hour, but during non-rush hours. And it'll offer that reverse commute option for folks who perhaps live closer to the core and want to work in Burnsville or visit Burnsville any time of day. The project is fully funded, $150 million project. It's under construction. It's been coordinated with major highway projects like the 35W at 94 project. And we're excited to begin service here in late 2021. The image on the right shows the alignment for the Orange Line. So if we're looking at towards the south there, Burnsville Heart of the City Station, the route will come from 35W South to Highway 13 northeast, and then turn on Nicollet Avenue to go directly to the station at Burnsville Heart of the City Station, proceeding west and south along Travelers Trail to I-35W and Burnsville Parkway Station. From there, it'll use the on-ramp to go I-35W north to the station at 98th Street in Bloomington, right next to South Bloomington Transit Center, continuing north to a station at Knox and American Boulevard, next to the Southtown shopping area. And then we're building a new transit-only tunnel beneath 494 to connect to the station at Knox Avenue and 76th Street, next to the Best Buy headquarters. The route continues north into Richfield with a station in the on and off ramps at 66th Street, and onwards north to an existing station at 46th Street, and then to a new station at Lake Street. You may have seen the station arches kind of rising up out of the freeway level there for that new station. I should mention that Orange Line will be using min-pass lanes on along I-35W. And to get into downtown, the Orange Line will use a transit-only ramp to get to downtown stations along Marquette Avenue and 2nd Avenue. And so the Orange Line will be the next metro line that will be implemented as part of the overall build out of the metro network of light rail transit and bus rapid transit lines. Next slide, please. This map shows the existing and planned build out of the metro network of LRT and bus rapid transit lines. You have the operational lines like the blue line and green line, as well as lines that are under construction like the orange line, the D line, the green line extension known as Southwest LRT, as well as several other planned lines. And so these metro lines, they provide, faster, high frequency transit in the region's busiest transit corridors. They use specialized vehicles with a bigger capacity, and they have stations which provide improved waiting areas. Stations for these lines, if you've ridden light rail, they have features similar to that. So you pay before you board. You can purchase your tickets at a ticket vending machine at the station. Stations have real-time bus arrival signs. Stations have heating, lighting, bike parking, emergency telephones, cameras, landmark signs, information kiosks. So those are some of the ways that we provide an improved experience with the metro system. Next slide, please. So here we have a couple aerial images of the Burnsville Heart of the City station site. On the left, we have the kind of before picture with the orange square representing the station platform location. So you can see the stations at the southwest corner of Highway 13 and Nicollet Avenue, next to the new Maven's apartment, or the newer, I guess I should say, Maven Apartments development. And on the right, you have an aerial plan view. So as I mentioned, the orange line will take Highway 13, I guess it's northeast, and then turn south on Nicollet Avenue and then it'll turn into a new driveway directly to the station. And there's also a loop here in case buses need to lay over in between trips. And just north of the platform is what we call a kiss and ride loop. So if you're lucky enough to have someone drop you off at the station and kiss you, you could just walk to the station platform there. And the city has also built some parking stalls just west of the station here, so in case people want to park and ride and use the orange line here. So next image, please. Thanks. So here we have a couple images of the station's progress on the left and the final rendering on the right. So you can see the station platform has been poured. They've begun erecting the station shelter, installing translucent roofing there, some decorative metal paneling, and they've already hung the real-time, digital display monitors and also the landmark sign you can see on the far left there. On the right here, there's some benches and some of the lighting that's already been installed too. the final rendering, you can see, the landscapes all in place. You see the 60-foot Orange Line Bus Rapid Transit bus in the background, as well as the information kiosk and the ticket vending machine and card validator infrastructure that's all been activated. Next slide, please. So the Orange Line will proceed west and then south on Travelers Trail to the first, say, northbound station at I-35W in Burnsville Parkway, the northwest corner of Travelers Trail and Burnsville Parkway. So again, we have the aerial satellite image on the left with the orange showing the platform location. And on the right is the aerial plan view, which shows the also the platform and the bus pad where the bus will stop, as well as some new sidewalks that we're building on the east side of Travelers Trail as part of the project. Next slide, please. And here's an image from this week of where, of how far the station has advanced construction-wise. Similarly, the shelter steel has been erected, the roofing has been installed, as well as the real-time display monitors and the landmark signs. So we're really excited. The construction's, going pretty well, and we're excited to begin service in Burnsville late this year. And next slide, please. And so if you have any questions or comments, we have a lot of information available on our website. My contact information is also here too. And so I'm not sure if there's any questions or if I'm happy to welcome them or pass it on to my colleague, Erin.
Yeah, I think we have a couple minutes that we can do questions if anyone has one. Maybe I'll start with one. Dan Keeley had mentioned in the chat, I think for those of us that are not in transit day in and day out, there is current express service from MVTA that goes from Burnsville to Minneapolis, vice versa, but it's more of a periodic scheduled is my understanding. And then this is more of a commuter thing that would run, like you said, every 10 or 15 minutes, has multiple stops, but it's a more regular. Is that it? Does that kind of, for in layman's terms, sum up the difference?
Yeah, I would say, so this is not really like an express route. You're probably going to arrive, if your destination is downtown Minneapolis, the express route will probably be a bit faster because this one will make all the stops in Bloomington, Richfield, and Minneapolis. I think we're looking at overall travel time between Burnsville and downtown Minneapolis in the 35-minute to 40-minute range. So yeah, one thing that's different about this, I think, yeah, you're correct, is that it provides that service all day, not just during the rush hours. And so it, offers the opportunity to, not just travel during rush hour, but to work those, second or third shifts in Burnsville, or just visit any time of day, afternoon, weekends as well.
And if I'll just add, it is very well put. I'm getting probably the most popular question I get is, well, MVTA already serves 35W. Why is the Orange Line overlapping it? It seems like duplicate service, and it's really two very distinctly different service types with all of these stops on the Orange Line. This is for a person who just wants to let's say get on in Burnsville and get off in Bloomington or Richfield, or get on in Richfield and come to Bloomington so very short distance, station to station service, and more regular daily routine for those who depend on public transit or choose to use public transit because they're in a high density residential area and they don't want a car because maybe they ride their bike a lot, and when they do want to go somewhere, they want to get on a bus, but it's not necessarily I live in the burbs and work in downtown, which is what MVTA has been serving for that express morning and evening service. And then we have some weekend as well to serve that. But so this is the short station to station, spot to spot versus MVTA's express service in the downtown.
Or if you're traveling at a time when the express service isn't running. Yeah, great. Any other questions for Juan?
I have a quick question for Juan.
Yeah.
Two questions. How late at night will it run? If you're going to a Twins night game and you want to take this rather than light rail to Bloomington, how late does it go? And what's the fare going to be?
Yeah, the fare will remain the same. So we have it's $2 during non-rush hour, and I need to double check, but it's about $2.25 during, I believe $2.50 during rush hour. Sorry, I should have that information available. But I know it's 2 hours during non-rush hour. There, we do have special rates, you know, for folks who maybe have low income. We have a program called the Transit Assistance Program, where if you, for example, have received EBT or your son or daughter has free reduced lunch at school, they can sign up for the TAP program and pay $1 a ride. There's also different rates for folks with, for senior citizens and folks with disabilities. The rate's generally $1. And we're still hashing out the details for service, you know, how late it will operate. I'd say 10 p.m. It'll run at least till 10 p.m. You know, the service frequency may taper off later in the evening, so it may not be, you know, every 15 minutes between 9 and 11 p.m. But I'll say it'll operate at least until 10 p.m., potentially until midnight. But we're still hashing out those details with our service development team at Metro Transit.
All right. Okay, well, with that, I think we're on schedule to switch over to, I think we have Aaron here, correct, from MVTA. Aaron, you ready to jump in?
I am ready.
Great, thanks.
So first off, my name is Aaron Bartling. I am the planning manager at Minnesota Valley Transit. And just want to take a second to thank you for inviting me to share updates for MVTA. We can go to the next slide. So the main focus of my presentation is going to be on service updates and kind of starting with the baseline of where we're at today, because a lot has happened with COVID. So kind of setting that baseline of routes that are out there, and then talk about some upcoming changes and even some that have happened recently in the Burnsville area, and then wrap up with special event service, and then put in a plug for our system-wide study here at the end and an upcoming focus group that we have. Next slide. So getting a baseline of where we're at, you can see the map here shows all existing routes in the Burnsville area. So we have several local routes and then a few express routes running through the city as it stands today. So on the left there, you can see routes that are at or even above pre-COVID levels. So on the local side, MVTA is almost back to normal for our local route service. There's a few exceptions to that, but for the most part, we've returned local back to their regular service levels before the pandemic began. And then we've actually had an opportunity to expand service in areas as well. So you can see the 447, which Doug had mentioned previously. On the south side, they're operating along the 42 corridor. This is a new route that we've implemented, and I have a slide that'll give a little more details on that route as well. And then our 495 service provides nice connections out into Shakopee at Marshall Road, and then some connections in Savage as well. And then for Minneapolis Express service, we're currently running our Route 460, which is our highest ridership express route, and then 465, both currently at reduced levels compared to pre-COVID. Next slide. So that's a little bit about where we're at. So now kind of jumping ahead to where we're heading. So first things first, with the fall service change, which is effective in September this year, the biggest focus of this service change is the return of express service. We do anticipate a return to office for many downtown workers and University of Minnesota staff and students. So we will be prioritizing getting service back into Minneapolis and St. Paul as well, and prioritizing those highest ridership routes pre-COVID to make sure that we're meeting the demand as employees are returning back to work downtown and they have the express options that they need. And then another big focus of our downtown express routes that will impact riders is utilizing the new Lake Street station along 35W, and then the 12th Street transit ramp going into downtown. So these are both wrapped into the Crosstown to 94 project along 35W, and those will be wrapping up here this fall, and we'll be utilizing both of those facilities to improve reliability and make sure that our routes are running on time. So some nice benefits that we're looking forward to using. Next slide. So then again, touching on Route 447. So this is a new route that MVTA launched in February of this year. And it came out of some pilot routes that we were testing out over the winter and some needs that we heard from riders, as well as needs that have come out of various studies that have taken place in our service area that have highlighted the need for east-west transit connections along County Road 42. So this route aims to meet that need, and it serves Apple Valley Transit Station on the east side, and then travels along 42 to hit Burnsville Center and surrounding areas, and then in Savage Park and Ride, and in some retail areas, and then heading down to downtown Prior Lake with some new stop amenities in Prior Lake, and then finally ending at Mystic Lake Casino and Hotel. So the route does operate 30-minute frequency all day, so 7 a.m. to midnight, and that's really targeting the entertainment destinations on the far west end there, and some of the late night trips that could be generated from that. And we are running it 7 days a week, so pretty enhanced service, and we're excited for how it's starting out. We continue to see ridership growth month over month, and look forward to seeing it continue to grow as we see this need continue along the corridor. Next slide. So the next service I want to touch on is MVTA Connect. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with the service, but it is an on-demand service that riders can book through a mobile app. And I showed MVTA's mobile app up there that riders utilize to go in and book their rides. So the service does run from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. every single day. And you can see the existing boundary there up on the screen. Currently we're serving Savage on the far west end, then through Burnsville, Apple Valley, and all the way over to Rosemount and DCTC on the eastern edge of our service area. Some of the top destinations that we see riders going to, specifically within Burnsville, are Burnsville Transit Station, and this is where a lot of fixed route transfers occur. So riders are using the Connect service to connect into our fixed route system. And I think as we see express routes return, we'll see more of that, more of those transfers taking place as well. And then Walmart's a big destination for riders, and then other retail areas, specifically around Burnsville Center and Nicollet Ave on the southern side there. And then another big update to share with Connect, with our fall service change, we will also be expanding our Connect service. So the biggest impact to the Burnsville area will be extending the hours to 9 p.m. So currently we end at 7. So we'll be extending it by a couple hours into the night. And then we'll also be adding service in Egan. It'll be more of a standalone service area, but opportunities to connect to it through fixed route from Burnsville. Next slide. And then kind of touching base on Orange Line again. So MVTA will actually be launching a route that we've kind of branded as the Orange Line Connector. This was a route we applied for regional solicitation funds in the 2018 cycle and were awarded funds for the project. So this will be weekday local service, and you can see a draft route concept up on the screen there of what we're initially thinking for what the route will look like, but we'll be working with residents in the area over the next few months here to identify what exactly that routing looks like and where we should be serving our stops as well. But this route will be 30-minute frequency all day. So it'll tie nicely into Orange Line service in heart of the city, as well as existing MVTA services on both ends of the route. So Burnsville Transit Station on the north end, and then Burnsville Center area, and some transfer opportunities down there as well. So as of now, we're expected to launch this with our winter service change, which is currently set for the end of November. So just ahead of Orange Line launching. And then touching on special event service and what we've been working on here this summer, and I'll just touch briefly on it. The biggest one that we started with was our For Fun bus. This is service providing connections from Mall of America and regional transit connections there out to Shakopee and Prior Lake. So serving Mystic Lake Casino, Canterbury Park, and Valley Fair. So it's a weekend only route, initially driven by a need to serve Valley Fair and get people out there, but then we also saw an opportunity to hit a couple other destinations as well. So far that route's been going well, and we continue to see ridership increases weekend over weekend on that as well. And then a couple of other events that we've been working with, the Prior Lakes Lakefront Music Fest, partnering with them and relying on some of our existing transit service like 447 to get riders or event goers out to that festival. Twin Cities Summer Jam, we're working with them to provide kind of a shuttle service from a park and ride to help with parking needs. And then we'll be doing some Vikings service to their training camp here later this summer. And then our Vikings shuttle is expected to return for Vikings home games this fall, winter as well. So kind of took a break from that during COVID, but we'll be returning that service. And I just wanted to touch on these to show that MVTA is very interested in special event services. So as things come up in the Burnsville area, feel free to reach out, and we're always willing to consider how we can help. And that ranges from just staging a bus and providing a place for people to take shelter if it's super hot out. We've done that here this summer already, to even just providing service to help with parking needs and things like that as well. So next slide. And then on the service side, the last thing I'll touch on is State Fair. So we are returning our State Fair service at Burnsville Transit Station this year. And I've provided the kind of high level look at what the schedules will look like out of Burnsville Transit Station. So we have added some additional trips in the peak hours to help with demand that we've seen in previous years. So looking at 15-minute frequency and then hourly for the rest of the day. And then similar on weekends, but instead of hourly, we'll be looking at 30-minute frequency. So we're excited to get this back up and running, and we'll see how it goes. State Fair is a big ridership boost for us, and it's an opportunity to market our service to riders who don't normally ride transit service, except for the State Fair. So next slide. Then the last thing I'll touch on is the system-wide study that is currently underway. So MVTA has partnered with Southwest Transit on this study, and you can see both of our service areas in the map on the screen. But this study is to provide a comprehensive review of our current service for both agencies and find or examine those unmet needs and opportunities for additional routes or better coordinated services between our service areas as well into the regional network as well. So the study aims to address internal and external factors, things like parking supply in areas, what our schedules and route designs are like, the amenities that we're providing to our customers, how we market our service, the different land uses that we have in our service areas. And then a big piece of it will also be COVID-19 and how we expect that to impact service overall, more so on the express side and looking into the future. So I put the website up there, but you can also go to MVTA's website and find access to get more details as well. And then next slide, the last thing I'll touch on is an upcoming focus group that's related to the system-wide studies. So we actually have 2 focus groups next week, one on Wednesday and one on Friday. And these are aimed at employers in the area, as well as potential new riders. So a great opportunity to share feedback or concerns or needs that you have or businesses have to directly impact how we design our future network for the study. And you can see a timeline up there, kind of where we're at here. We're doing some outreach and stakeholder analysis currently, and then we're in the beginning stages of developing what our final network design will look like. And the goal is to wrap the study up here this October with our final design and recommendation to implement for kind of an overhaul of our system. So next slide. With that, I can take any questions that anyone has. I put my contact information up there too. So if you have any follow-up questions or if you want more information on the focus groups too, please reach out and I can get you connected into that.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. We have just a couple minutes for questions here. Do we have a question for Aaron?
This is Tom Taylor. I have one.
Okay.
I really like the idea of the Connect service, and it's really a last mile pickup and delivery services is my transportation background. It's kind of the way I look at it. How but it's not cheap. It can't be cheap, right? I mean, what is the cost differential with providing that service, versus the fixed route systems? And then what are the funding sources coming from that to be able to provide that?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. And we have found when we launched this service, we initially started with a smaller service area focused on Savage and parts of Burnsville. And it overlaid an existing route that we were running that was one of our lower performing routes. So that was kind of our target. If this service performed at or around that route, that was kind of a success for us because it expanded the reach for the riders that were currently using that fixed route, and it expanded the hours as well. So initially we were very similar to our fixed route that was in place at the time, and we've continued to see success with the route, and we've continued to expand it and add more buses and add more areas to the boundary as well. And with each expansion, you tend to see a little bit of a dip in the overall performance metrics as you add more vehicles, but then it tends to pick right back up as you continue to see increased ridership. So it's a service that we still to this day are seeing month over month record ridership on, and we're excited to see it continue to grow. And we expect that it'll be comparable to some of our local fixed routes that are out there today. So as that happens, it does put it pretty comparable with some of our local fixed route, some of our like flex route services that we've operated in the area. So it does overall become comparable. Starts out slightly lower, but most routes do until they're able to build that ridership.
That's really good to hear. I like that. It really is a maturity of public transit. I'm really impressed by it.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Aaron. With that, we get to our grand finale here with Jen and the city of Burnsville. Jen, you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to the Chamber for having the city of Burnsville to provide a few transportation updates. So I have a few things to talk about today. I'm going to talk about our local streets and trails, different projects we have going on coming up, 35W and Cliff Road project, our multimodal and complete streets study, and then a few grant opportunities that we're pursuing. And in the previous presentations, I'll be kind of calling back to those because we are working with our partners on some of these projects. So for our local road improvements, we have a street improvement program that it's an annual program for maintenance and upkeep of our local roads. We have 225 miles of city streets that we have to maintain in Burnsville. And our program, this annual program, helps to identify and prioritize needs for improvements. And funding comes from city tax base, state aid, and then special assessments. And that picture on the bottom, that was from our 2020 Travelers Trail, a section of Travelers Trail, and you can see the before and after. That's the goal of the program is to keep our streets in good form for going into the future. So 2022, I wanted to just call out a few that we're proposing, few areas that we're proposing in 2022. Each year we do about 8 to 10 miles, and a lot of them are in residential neighborhoods, and I wasn't going to show all of the details of the residential neighborhoods. So these 3 areas are more in our commercial areas, which might matter to this group. So we are going to be doing a street rehab in the heart of the city. So 126th between Nicollet and Pillsbury, 125th and First Avenue. This has been on our list to do for quite a while, but there's been so much redevelopment in the area. We're trying to find a place to get these streets in so that we can kind of wait till the construction is slowing down. So we're not repaving streets, then to have them be kind of torn up again with construction vehicles. So we're hoping for a little brief pause in the redevelopment and get these streets in, and then hopefully it picks back up again. And then also in the medical campus area, we're going to be rehabbing Nicollet Boulevard, part of Portland, Community Drive, and Fairview Drive next year. And on Buck Hill Road, south of South Cross to the border with Lakeville. Right now, CenterPoint Energy is in doing a pipeline project. And so we deferred our project to be coming in after they are done with their work. We have a few trail projects. So the Lake Marion Greenway, that's a 20-mile corridor. It touches 4 cities, and we have 3 segments of that in Burnsville. 2 out of the 3 are complete now. So a few years ago, we completed a half a mile from Kramer Nature Preserve to Williams Drive. And then just earlier this year, we're mostly complete. We're doing punch list things right now, but on a 1.6 mile segment from Savage to Sunset Park. And that's the map that's shown on the screen right now. The picture on the top of the screen is the completed boardwalk, which goes through a portion of Kelleher Park. And then we have a gap, a 1.5 mile gap from Sunset Park to Rose Bluff Williams Drive. And so we're actively pursuing an alignment for that and working with Dakota County on funding for that. The Cliff Road Trail, that's a project that is 3/4 of a mile on the north side of Cliff Road between Trunk Highway 13 and just into the Egan border, just like 1 block into the Egan border to connect with a trail that's already there. We received a federal grant, and I believe it's 2017. We've been working on design ever since. And so I'm very excited that construction begins on that trail next week. And it's funded with a federal grant. Dakota County is a partner, and then we have some city funding. This is the trail area that Councilmember Keeley alluded to. He kind of gave a little preview of what I was going to talk about. So this area is the trail connection along 35W south of Black Dog Road. That is the access from Burnsville to Cross. And in 2019, the picture shows we had excessive flooding that year in 2019. I don't believe that trail was open more than a month, probably. I'm not sure of the actual time, but one of the cyclists and who takes that trail took this picture of showing she can't get through. The table on the bottom shows, what would be the average, the trail elevation is at a 698, and that floods on average 18 to 36 days per year. In 2019, it was far, far more than that. So we're trying to raise it up to a 702, which has that duration, that flooding duration of between 3 and 7 days a year. And here is kind of a preview of how we're doing that. So the trail, the existing trail alignment is the yellow line. And what we're proposing is to move it up the slope closer to the ramp, and it will stay mostly out of the flooding. We received a federal grant for that project, and local funds will pay for the balance. We're already beginning design right now, and we're anticipating a spring 2022 construction. This is a moving off of the local roads and trails. This is a regional project, 35W and Cliff Road, that our public works director in Burnsville has been working on for a few years. This is a freight improvement, a transportation improvement project. This little picture over here, right now, if you are coming off the off-ramp, you have to take a hard right to this section of Cliff Road, and that's how the larger semi trucks are operating today. This improvement will allow for them to come off and have a longer deceleration lane, and then utilize a roundabout and moving Cliff Road south of this parcel right here. We're also anticipating a spring 2022 construction. Received a federal grant for this. Dakota County is a partner. City funds are paying, and then we also have a deed grant that we were using for that project. Currently, I'm working with a group on multimodal and complete street study. We are actively in the public and community engagement part, and I'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. But our multimodal systems plan, we're working with a consultant who's looking at existing conditions, seeing where the needs are, and trying to engage the public to see what are the needs from Burnsville residents and the public. We're reviewing new mobility. So things like bird scooters or our car or Nice Ride. We're looking to see where might those fit into Burnsville. We do have 5 EV charging stations in the heart of the city. We're looking to see where would be potential for increasing those, and where would be locations to have more EV charging stations. And then our consultant is providing recommendations for where we can make multimodal improvements and an implementation, a prioritization, and a funding plan. So it's a big project. I've gotten funding, the city is funding 70% of it, and we got a SHIP Dakota County grant for 30% of this study. And then we're also, part of it is to establish a complete streets policy with design guidelines for how to implement some of these, and what kinds of things we should look at when we're doing our street projects, and including multimodal components. And to participate, we have this standalone website, walkbikeridebeville.com. And in there is all sorts of information about the study so far, but an online survey and a wiki map. So I'm encouraging anyone who's interested in this to go to that online survey from a business perspective or from your own personal perspective. And follow, give us information to help guide this study, guide where we want to do improvements, and help guide the prioritization. The wiki map is one where if there's locations, specific locations, you can pinpoint that this is a problem crossing area. We should really have a trail here. You can mark it up on a map, and that's all being put into just one big map that our consultant is using to find where are the hot spots that we need to do improvements in the city. And then the last thing I'll touch on are a couple of grant opportunities that the city is pursuing. The first is called the RAISE grant, Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity, because all grants have to have a fun acronym. And this is the project that we are pursuing, and it is part of what Ryan Wilson from MnDOT had talked about, the Trunk Highway 13 corridor vision. This is the end of it, Nicollet and 13. And we are looking at this particular improvement because it will, it's a multimodal improvement. It helps significantly with getting peds and bikes across 13. It also is significant for vehicles with the new Orange Line station and the park and ride, the MVTA station across the street. Having multimodal access is just vital. So we're going to be making that application. I believe it's due next week, and hope for the best. But this is a project that's pretty high priority for the city, getting multimodal crossing of 13. And this is one of the ways to do it that also is good for vehicle operations, all modes, and transit. And the other grant opportunity that we're pursuing, and this is a partnership with Dakota County, and Doug Abere mentioned it briefly, is a Transportation Economic Development, TED grant through MnDOT, and a Transportation Economic Development Infrastructure, TED grant from DEED. These applications are due at the end of August, and so we're just starting a preliminary look at it. Just as Doug said, this is a real high level concept. We're kind of delving into more detail. So the project we're applying for is the slip ramp that would be splitting off a separate ramp from 35W South under County Road 42 and then into a roundabout that provides access to Buck Hill Road going south or into the Burnsville Center. And so this is an exciting opportunity, 2 grants in 1 year. Hopefully we can get one or both of them. That would be pretty fantastic. So that's the end of my presentation. I think we could open it up to questions for anyone at this point.
Great. Yes. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to all of our presenters. I want to give one last thank you to our sponsors for this morning. And while people think of what other questions they have, our bronze sponsors today are Fairview, M Health Fairview, and Xcel Energy. And our gold sponsors are EFH Companies, Shippers Resource Center, and Krause Anderson Companies. So maybe, Jen, do we want to do stop share and let people, we can go back to a gallery view here and see if anybody else has any questions. Or if any of our speakers thought of anything that they missed and they're wanted to address.
Hey, Jennifer, not a question, but just a shout out to city staff for their aggressive pursuing of grants to fund all these transportation projects.
Yeah.
And a shout out also to you and the chamber for putting this forum together. It was very informational.
Thanks, Skip. We couldn't do it without all our partners, and I know this is critical information for our businesses. So, but there's a lot going on, as you can tell. And special thanks to Jen Desrude at the city for putting together the PowerPoint and helping coordinate all of our presenters putting this together. Any other questions?
So Jen, this is Mike Karen. The Burnsville, the improvements at 35 and Cliff Road that you talked about, when are those scheduled to start?
We're proposing that those will start in the spring of 2022, so next spring.
Thank you.
That's exciting. That's been in the works for a long time. Anybody else?
With the amount of truck traffic in that area, I can understand Mike's concern for when that project's going to start.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be an improvement. There's definitely a lot of truck traffic, but I think the design is going to improve things quite a bit.
Absolutely. Tom, did you have another question?
I did. I just wondered what coordination on that project, the cliff with the straightening out of Cliff Road and the roundabouts in there, coordinates with the plans to replace the bridges or the bridges over 35W. Can anybody speak to that? Is there trails plans in there? What, kind of maybe share a little bit more about what's taking place with that.
I don't know if Ryan Wilson wants to try, but I can try. This is Ryan Peterson. As Jen said, I've been the city's rep on that project. And there has been a lot of discussion with MnDOT on it. Was it 2026? I think the discussion was when that would get replaced. And right now, like the bridge abutments for the bridge, the 35W bridge, are actually in that railroad right away. And it's unknown whether they can stay there or not. If they can't, then the bridge will have to get longer, and but it will open up the possibility for making more improvements for trails and that kind of thing going through there. So MnDOT's been highly engaged on this. They've been part of our project management team, and some of the things that you talked about have been discussed. But dealing with the railroad is a very, very slow, onerous process. And we just don't know yet exactly what they're going to do. But the thinking is they may force those to move out, which in some ways will open up opportunity for a better cliff road going underneath it.
Yep, nothing to add. Just slight correction that again, that would be thought to, that bridge replacement was thought to be part of the 25-26 project. So we're kind of in the early phases, and we don't know what year that would be in. But the point is, we'd have to be ready for a 25 project.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan and Ryan. Any other questions while we have this captive audience? We're coming up against time, but I want to make sure while we're here. All right. Well, with that, we just hit 9:30. Again, thank you so much. It was a lot to fit into an hour and a half. Thanks for taking the time to be here and to present and to listen. And we look forward to some exciting projects ahead, and we'll be sharing some of the opportunities for input with the open houses and things that were mentioned. If there's anything else from our presenters where you would like business input, please just send me a link if there's a focus group or an open house or something, and we'll make sure to get that out. So thank you, everybody, and have a great Friday.
Thank you.